Next item is a discussion of revenue options and possible hearing on August 1st. So what I have is some analysis. So if I may start on the spreadsheets. What I did was I went back and looked at the relevant accounting information in regards to cash, budgets, revenues, and expenditures. On this spreadsheet, I've identified years 08 to 2017, but actually the average analysis goes all the way back to 2004. For 2015, I made some adjustments to the numbers for one-time circumstances. Specifically in 2015, I deducted $1 million for lumber sales. That was a one-time occurrence. 2016, I deducted $1,824,000 both in expenditures and revenues that were one-time budget or levy shift expenditures. In 2017, obviously the year is not completed, so there are some estimates that were calculated to come up with year-end numbers. But basically what it says is that over that time period, from 2004 to 2017, revenues are changing at about 1.33%, 1.3% a year, and expenditures are growing at about 3.3% a year. Revenues received against budgeted revenues are about 102%. So we conservatively budget revenues and receive about 2% in actual dollars more than what we budget for. In expenditures, we expend only 93%. Again, we budget conservatively for expenditures and spend something less than that on a consistent basis. Last line on the bottom. Budgeted expenditures expended is 93% of actual. Now, however, the last couple of years, it has been 95, 96, 95, 95%. So the trend, albeit historically has an average of around 93%, is currently closer to 95%. The trend on the revenue side recently has dropped to 102, but has been as high as even 110, 107 years
So that
prior.
110 in 2015 it includes all the adjustments.
That's correct. So that's history. Next page, I then went and extrapolated and looked at a lid lift of $2,700,000. And the reason for picking that number is we are currently at $1.40 per thousand in our current levy rate. The maximum, without going to an excess levy lid lift, is $1.80. So at 40 cents, that would bring us up to the maximum. So I brought us up to the capacity just slightly below the maximum in looking at a lid lift dollar of 37 cents. That's just the way the numbers kind of worked out. So that 37 cents is a $2,700,000 lid lift request. The need, as identified by the Finance Committee, was about a $5 million reduction in total for next year. And that's where that 17.5% number comes into place. So if we look at the need, less the 2017 reductions of about $1,733,000 is, leaves a need of about $3,267,000, less a levy rate increase, a lid lift of $2,700,000, still leaves about a $560,000 shortfall. But there are a number of variables that will come into that analysis as we get into the 2018 budget that revolve around how much revenue did we receive in excess of what we budgeted for in 2017. How much expenditures, how close to the budgeted expenditures do we come? Do we go above that 95% and get closer to the 100%? Both of those having opposite impacts. In other words, if we receive more revenue than we're budgeting for, that's a good component. If we spend all of what we expected to budget, if we expend all of what we budgeted for, that takes away from that availability. So it ends up coming down to a question around where is cash at the end of the year as to whether or not we're going to need to dig deeper into 2018 if the levy lid lift proposition is successful and we can increase the current expense revenues by $2,700,000. So we're not completely out of the woods even with a lid lift, depending on how things move in 2017. But what it does do, and again, I'm kind of projecting conservatively, that instead of 102% that we look at 101% of budgeted revenues received, looking at the projection for the 5-year period of 18 through 22. And instead of 95% of budgeted expenditures, I'm looking at 96% of budgeted expenditures. That brings our cash on hand percentages up to 11 to almost 14% over that 5-year period. And at a 37-cent rate, the average household, the average home,
How did you project the expenditures that you spent each year?
I use 96%. So balancing the budget,
Oh, by balancing.
by balancing the budget,
Yes.
and then saying, yeah, by balancing the
So
budget.
it's the same amount as revenue?
Correct, correct. So at 37-cent increase for property taxes, the average home value in Mason County is $236,000 as of last week, this weekend. It changes on a regular basis. and it's moving up slightly, but at $236,000, that represents a cost of about $87 per homeowner in Mason County, based on the average of a median house. So that's some of the supporting data. It comes close, but it's still, well, yes, it comes close, but it still doesn't get us to. If I may ask, on the next sheet, I stapled these wrong. Can you turn to the last page? So I have 3 ballot measure property texts. One discusses criminal justice levy, which would give us a maximum of up to 50 cents, but because we're at $1.40 to do the maximum, we would be able to ask for is 40 cents. And that would only be for a 6-year period. And then it would revert back to what the old highest lawful levy rate would be. So that money would go away. A levy lid lift is a request to increase the levy rate by a dollar amount, which then ultimately relates to a rate of, at a maximum, would be around 37 to 40 cents. And in the language, it would be permanent. So every year after that, the highest lawful levy would be increased by that rate, by that dollar amount that was put into the proposition. Multi-year lid lift is also allowed. And what this allows for is for an increase in a single year of the amount, in this case, 37 cents, followed by successive years of additional increases. And if we look at that, I propose that we use, which has been successful in the past, a CPI clause, which says that, and we can increase over a complete 6-year period, because that's the maximum that you can use to do increases, a rate of that which is the CPI for that year. In other words, if we would ask for a $2,700,000 levy increase in year 2018, 19 through 23 would take that number and increase it by the 1% allowed, plus a CPI dollar amount. So it would begin to start incrementally increasing a little more.
But you still have the depth, so you can go over the 180.
No, you can't. We would max out. But what would happen is, as assessed values begin to increase, the rate, the current $1.40 would be shrinking. Because the $1.40 is the amount of tax divided by the assessed value, which is in the denominator. So as that denominator grows, the resulting rate starts to shrink. And as that rate goes from $1.40 to $1.37, $1.35, $1.30, because the denominator is increasing, now we have more capacity to get us up to the $1.80.
Looking at the CPI and the
Correct. So what I have is, on the first page, is a proposed resolution.
You don't have anything on the excess levy.
Excess levy would take us over $1.80. That's a different conversation. So when you get to the $1.80, you can go to don't hold me to it, I think it's $2.45. With an excess levy that says I want to go above my $1.80 and ask for increases. So I have, I have not had an opportunity to pass this by Tim Whitehead and or Mike Dorsey. We talked about it on Friday, Thursday and Friday last week. They are out of town this week, but I will be communicating with them, and with the direction from the commission, can go forward with whatever the desires are. But let me, since the commission has not had a chance to read through this, because I have not had an opportunity to finish it over the weekend, I'd like to read through it. Please let me know if there's anything you want to add, change, modify, or delete from this resolution. So, whereas Mason County is authorized to levy a regular tax, property tax not to exceed $1.80 per thousand of assessed value on property within the county, and whereas Mason County continues to experience a financial crisis resulting from the cumulative long-term effects of the passage of Initiative 695, which indirectly, drastically reduced funding for law and justice and public health, and Initiative 747, which limited property tax increases to 1%, while the average rate of expenditure increases is approaching 3.3%. As a result, the financial solvency of Mason County is threatened, and in spite of aggressive crippling reductions continues to be in peril without prudent and swift revenue adjustments. And whereas the Mason County Commissioners responded by taking action to cut expenses to offset the drastic increase in expenditures in an attempt to balance the budget. Government expenses in 2017 were cut by $1.7 million to approximately 7.3% of the current expense fund. County expenses will be reduced in 2018 by an additional $550,000 where possible. County workforce was reduced by over XX positions. We don't have the exact number yet. Work hours were reduced for some positions. Offices shortened their hours open to the public as a result of fewer employees. Commissioners will use the road fund bank capacity to expand traffic police and diversion and purchase pursuit vehicles for the program.
So, did we decide that?
No, these are things I'm throwing out here to
I
say,
know, but you have it in the resolution, so.
no, this is a proposed resolution, this is a draft.
So
that's where I'm
explain
asking.
that one to me.
So, and I have heard conversations of this from a different number of angles. The road fund has bank capacity of about 900,000, maybe 800 and change. If it were to draw that bank capacity down, it would receive additional $800,000+ worth of revenue. If traffic policing, which is budgeted at $1.5 million, were to be increased by the amount of what's needed for the traffic policing deputies to receive new vehicles. The last time we purchased vehicles into that fund was 2007, 8. We could,
For the whole patrol.
for that fund, for traffic policing deputies.
But
So
now they're not actually assigned as deputies. I think they get a time card thing.
no, they have 12 deputies assigned to traffic policing. I'm sorry?
I thought they moved to a percent of time.
At some point they did, but now they have 12 deputies assigned.
Right.
There's, I think 11.
Yes and no, they did both, because they ended up, in order to use up the other money, they also allotted some time for some of the usage at one point. So they had the deputies set up, that they were trying to
So,
use more.
yeah, I believe what they did was to assign a certain number of deputies specifically to traffic policing.
5 or 6.
And then as other deputies were doing traffic policing, they allocated their time into that department. Now, what they have done is assigned, I believe it's 11 deputies and 1 sergeant into traffic policing currently. But the last time vehicles were purchased into that department was in 7 or 8.
May I?
Yeah.
One of the things that I found when I was doing the research was I found that some of the monies, how we've had our diversions, we could actually buy vehicles directly out of that department. And in order to buy vehicles directly out of the department, it has to be specifically issued for that specific purpose only. They can't just use them, buy them out of that for the road fund, buy them out of that and use it for other stuff. It has to be used specifically for the traffic policing.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can do
If I got a
both.
vehicle, that's my question. If I got a vehicle purchased by road fund money, and there was a call about a armed robbery, I mean, I can't use that car to go there?
No, you can't.
Okay.
Yeah. As long as your time predominantly is for traffic policing.
It'd actually just be the predominant.
If you were assigned as a deputy to be a traffic police deputy, then you could use it for any exigent circumstance that's required, but you would have to have your responsibilities within that department. What Commissioner Netherland is discussing, there are 2 diversions. There's a diversion that we currently do, which is to say, take $1.5 million out of the road fund and divert it into current expense and levy it with those dollars in current expense. We used to, so the request to the treasurer for current expense is to collect $9 million, and I'll just pick a relative number, $9 million for property taxes. With a traffic diversion, what would have been the $9 million property tax levy for roads is reduced to $7.5 million. And the $9 million becomes $10.5 million for current expense. So the levy rate then is calculated on the $10.5 million for current expense and this $7.5 million for the road fund.
That sounds like a levy shift.
Well, it is, except it's allowed under a traffic diversion.
Certain things you
Oh, you're
can,
saying you were.
Yeah.
You're allowed under a traffic diversion RCW.
as long as we keep
You
this,
were using the term traffic diversion. I get that one.
Yeah.
well, as long as we leave some specific in the road fund budget, for like the cars and stuff, machinery and stuff like that, you can actually take directly out of their budget without levying.
The second
without
diversion
shifting. Yeah, diversion.
is to do the traffic policing cost by the way we did it back in the very first couple of years when we had traffic policing. Instead of taking money and changing the rates, you leave the money in the road fund. And the current expense fund charges into the road fund the monthly cost for traffic policing. And then the road fund pays into current expense that reimbursement for those costs. I don't know if we can do both. I don't know if you can do the small D, which is the latter, where the money stays in the road fund, or the large D, which is what we're currently doing, which is actually diverting money out. I don't know if you can do both, so I'd have to determine that. But in any regard, whichever one we do ultimately do, we could pay for cars out of the traffic diversion for traffic police. Okay. And the suggestion here is the road fund would be, if we were to take $700,000 more to cover the cost of those vehicles out of their fund, they would be detrimentally impacted by reducing their revenue to a point where they couldn't properly manage their staff and their needs. But if they were to take their excess capacity and use that, then they have that additional $800,000 available to them to use to cover the cost of the funding for the vehicles. What it does do, however, it takes that excess capacity away, so that if in the future they needed $800,000 for some reason or another, they wouldn't have that available, those funds available.
One of the bummers is I found this too late for us to be able to take advantage also of what we did this year. We made $165,000 onto the cars that we already had gotten them. Might be able to take the $165,000 we owe next year and take it out of that, as long as it's directly for traffic. So,
Yeah, we have to be careful because we can't buy 30 cars for
yeah.
12 deputies. That's the issue
It
there.
has to, but there might be other machinery too we can look at, according to the law, that allows us to be able to utilize, but that was the one that
Those
came
are,
up right.
any machinery, quote, that is, or equipment that's needed for traffic policing could be paid for out of the traffic policing diversion. So in that regard, and that's what we did in the 7, 8, and 9 timeframe, was we paid for the original traffic policing cadre, as well as their equipment. The original first 6, I believe, vehicles were all paid for out of the traffic policing diversion. So that's something I'm throwing out there. I mean, this is a draft of a document that the commission will determine how to proceed. But that is an option to increase the vehicles for the sheriff's office. Commissioners will reduce road fund expenses and subsequent road fund levy to reduce the impact of the increase in the current expense levy. So there again, the commission can determine what the budget is going to be for the road department. It currently has what is called its highest lawful levy, which is what was my last year's highest lawful levy plus 1%. And that's a culmination of many years' worth of highest lawful levies plus 1%. That doesn't mean that it has to be at that level. If the commission deems that the road fund budget is to be something less than, quote, the highest lawful levy, then their component of the overall picture of the taxes in Mason County to Mason County citizens is impacted. So if we reduce the road fund budget expenditures, then that doesn't come to the levy rate, which the treasurer calculates, and is not assessed against the property owners. So if you reduce the road fund expenditures by $1 million, and I don't know what the relationship is, but if you reduce it by $1 million, that reduces property taxes by 10, 12, 15 cents, which helps to mitigate the increase on the current expense fund. Okay. Commissioners, elected officials, department heads can make donations to the county. Commissions, elected officials, department heads are requested to eliminate unnecessary expenses. Fees for services were adjusted where prudent to recoup the cost of doing business. And here again, thinking out of the box, the commission plans to create a volunteer adopt-a-park program to maintain county parks. And whereas these sweeping measures have significantly reduced county government services, strained internal systems, and left some essential programs underfunded and understaffed. And whereas the financial shortfall for 2018 will exceed $4.8 million, and the 5-year financial forecast shows that despite rigorous budget reductions, current expense fund expenses will continue to exceed revenues by over $1.8 million per year, completely exhausting Mason County's cash reserves by 2019, leaving county elected officials unable to provide our citizens with fundamental support and services required by law. And whereas the Washington state counties are required to provide similar essential services, Mason County currently has a property tax rate of 1.4 per thousand of assessed value. And whereas the Board of County Commissioners finds that it is necessary to protect the financial viability of the county current expense fund by allowing the electors to approve or reject a proposition under RCW 84-55-0502 to authorize the Board of County Commissioners to levy the county's regular property tax in an amount that would not exceed the limit factor that would otherwise be prescribed by RCW 85-55-010 of $1.80. So what this is saying under RCW 84-55-020, the county has the ability to lift the lid on the levy rate that it currently has up to the maximum allowable of $1.80. Whereas RCW 84-55-0502 authorizes the county to place a proposition before the voters to approve permanently an increase in regular property tax levies for multiple consecutive years, up to 6 consecutive years, during which period each year's authorized maximum legal levy shall be used as the base upon which an increased levy limit for the succeeding year is computed. So long as the ballot proposition states the dollar rate proposed for the first year of the consecutive years, along with the limit factor or the specific index, such as the consumer price index, to be used for determining a limit factor in each of the subsequent consecutive years. And whereas the property tax rate is computed based upon the overall total assessed value of property in the county on January 1, the Mason County Assessor estimates that the total assessed value of property for January 1, 2018 will be increased between blank and blank. But the final figure will not be determined until later in the year. Where this is relevant is in how do we calculate what the rate is for next year. We know what the rate is this year. It's $1.40 and pennies, hundreds of pennies. But we need to know what the rate is for next year, or at least estimate what the rate is for next year. So that we can calculate what the, let me rephrase that. We need to know what the assessed value is for next year, so that we can calculate what would be the estimated rate for next year. And this was a very quick and off-the-cuff analysis, but our assessed value rates have been moving up about 2% a year, so that's what I use to estimate my numbers. But this resolution would need some range coming from the assessor's office. If the total assessed value of property is increased 2%, the dollar rate to raise that same regular levy amount in the year, amount next year, as in 2018, plus the 1% limit factor, would be $1.40 per thousand of assessed valuation. And the voter-approved added levy rate to raise an additional $2.7 million would be 37 cents, for a total levy rate to be collected in 2018 of $1.77 per thousand of assessed valuation. And whereas the proceeds of the increase of the regular property tax on real property that would be authorized by the ballot proposition requested below will provide funding for retaining public safety, criminal justice, and other essential services provided by the county to its citizens. And whereas the proposal set out in this resolution requires approval by a simple majority of the voters of Mason County, now therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Mason County Commissioners pursuant to RCW 8455-050 and RCW 29A-04321 as follows. The best interest of the citizen of Mason County require the submission to the qualified voters of the county a proposition to levy regular property taxes above the limitations established in RCW 8455-010 for approval or rejection at the general election to be held November 7th, 2017. The proposition shall be to increase the county's regular property tax levy by 37 cents per thousand of assessed value for collection in 2018 for a total rate not to exceed $1.77 per thousand of assessed value, and to increase the levy as allowed by Chapter 8455 RCW for each of the successive 5 years. Section 2. The proposition would authorize the county to levy the regular property tax at a rate of $1.77 per thousand of assessed valuation on property in the county for collection in the year 2018. Therefore, the proposed increase will generate approximately $2.7 million of additional revenue for 2018. For the 5 years following 2018, years 2019 through 23, the proposition would also authorize use of a limit factor of 100% plus the percentage change in the consumer price index for all urban consumers in the Seattle-Tacoma-Bremerton area 1982-84 as a base year 100, reported for the first 6 months of each respective levy year, or the equivalent successor index as determined by the Board of Mason County Commissioners, or 1%, whichever is higher. So what this is saying is that using the CPI index that we currently use for, we use all cities for our CBAs. This uses the Seattle-Tacoma-Bremerton CPI. They're very much similar on a June-to-June basis. So in June, we would know what the CPI increase would be for the successive year so that we can budget for it properly. Rather than using the December to December or November to November, June to June gives us enough time to be able to budget next year for the revenue increase based on the CPI increase on this lid lift. Revenues from the property tax increases that will be authorized by the ballot proposition shall be used for the limited purpose of retaining public safety, criminal justice, and other essential services, and secondarily, begin to replenish the county's contingency contingency cash reserves. The proposition to be submitted to the electorate of Mason County shall read substantially as follows, and then we have the draft language. So this is an example of a multi-year. A single year would be exactly the same, except we would deduct the years 2 through 6 in the resolution, and only discuss the 1-year increase. And then the criminal justice one would be basically the same, except for the authorities. The RCW authorities, 845050 would have to be changed to the authority under 8452-135, which is the ability to increase levies for criminal justice purposes. That was a lot. But it offers a resolution as well as opposition ballot language for review based on your request from last week to allow for a hearing next Tuesday on August 1st to hear citizens in regards to the proposal to do a lid lift, as well as act upon a proposed resolution which we would fine tune and tweak based on your recommendation today and after having conversation with the prosecutor and deputy prosecutor. Both of whom are looking to be able to assist while they're out of town, who would then on Monday work through any details when they're here to prepare one for consideration on the agenda for Tuesday.
Okay. My preference would be to do the multi-year lid lift. I think that would help us kind of keep pace over a longer period of time, as well as the benefit to doing the lid lift, in my mind, as opposed to the criminal justice levy, is mainly the permanence of it. If the criminal justice levy would essentially be a 6-year window, and then it would be voted again, and I think that would create some uncertainty revenue-wise going beyond the 2023. Just my preference. So I would go with multi-year with Commissioner.
I also favor multi-year mixed business as well, for purposes of flexibility, permanency, and resetting our levy rate to be matching with CPI, which we try to do at the state level many years we can, so that since we have the local authorization, that's the way we get it, all we need. Now, the CPIs that we've chosen in the resolution, I'm wondering whether, you say it's similar to the all cities.
It is, I could change it
Because
to,
all urban consumers just say, oh, Tacoma Farmington, I think that does not ring as a good factor for people in the county. Urban people in Seattle will make more money, the cost of inflation is higher.
I'll change that to all cities, which is.
Is that the official reading
Yes.
of the CPI?
Yeah, I spoke with the Department of Labor Statistics who put the CPI numbers out on Friday to get some specifics around how they do their calculation. And the All Cities is a more rurally, it's more a rural type of a CPI as opposed to big city
So
CPI.
their database is more widespread, is what you're saying.
Widespread, as well as it avoids the big city communities.
The language about what we will do, there's a commitment that needs to be made there by us to
Yeah, that is part of the RCW.
buy the pursuit vehicles.
Oh, that, I'm sorry. Yeah, part of the RCW requires the proposition to identify what the money is for.
Okay.
And that's public safety, criminal justice, and essential services, as well as replenish cash reserves.
So I understand that, but I'm going back to your whereas in the resolution about the traffic police and diversion.
And that's
how
just
we'll
an
do
option.
that. I understand that, but I, between now and then, I don't know.
That can be done at any point in time.
But we're making a commitment here.
Yes, I understand.
And
That's
so
why
I
I
don't want to
pointed
make
it out
a
to you.
commitment until
Yeah.
we've fully vetted that. And I don't know if you feel like you should.
My,
You obviously.
My concern, and I don't maybe you have some thoughts on this, would help kind of clear it up a little bit for me, but my concern, I think, would be that I think we need to be on a regular replacement plan, again, to provide that predictability and stability, and I'm not sure, do you see this as a one-time kind of shot, or?
No.
The regular replacement plan was to have the sheriff's office purchase roughly 7 vehicles a year, which would be a normal cycle. Last year, this year, we did not purchase any vehicles. The year prior, we purchased 15, which, if we had purchased 7 this year, would have required 7 for next year. So the minimum, given the staffing level that they're at today, is roughly 7 vehicles a year. So the request this year, I think, is 15 vehicles. I'd have to go back and double check. I think it's 15 vehicles.
So I guess maybe a clearer way for me to ask, is this in an effort to get us back to par?
Yeah,
in order to-
one of the things is, I just found that we could do it, because we hadn't been doing it. I don't think it has to be in here, and I don't know why it is, because we didn't, but it is there now. I don't think it needs to be in there. I think we need to talk about how we're gonna do it, what we're gonna do. I do think it's important that we do start to establish the regularity of replacing vehicles as they're absolutely needed, and this is one way to do it. But I don't think it needs to be in this.
And I agree. And I guess the next bullet is another thing that we have to really totally get in this guy as well, and to make that commitment. That would be, but that could very well be a commitment we're making to try to decrease the impact on potentially this budget.
Yeah, I think the reducing of the road fund, I mean, that could be, just worded a little bit differently, that commissioners will consider, or, I don't know, maybe a better way to say vet, but,
I think we should consider it now a little bit, if you don't mind. I'll go ahead and, are you done, Commissioner? Okay. The idea of the cars and putting that in there, like I said, I think that's something that we should be in here, something we still need to talk about. For example, this year, I think we need to incorporate in there the $165,000 that we're gonna have to pay for the last year's cars that we got, and just make sure that they go through.
Can't do that through, again, we have to be careful.
Let's say if we make sure though that they're the vehicles for the thing, then we can.
Right.
And then I myself, I'm more in favor of what they call the, in all the stuff we've been reading, the single flavor, which is more like the first one, which is keeping it very simple. It's the idea you do one levy lid lift, and that continues on forever without it having to do all this other stuff they're doing. I'm a firm believer in the more complicated you make this, the less trusting they're gonna be in the public, and it's gonna come back to bite us. Because simple is much better for when you're dealing with the public. But also on top of that, there was something that I had read that showed that if you don't give a clear specific, your chances of passing are lessened. Something I had discussed with Frank was the idea of specifically calling out that this levy lid lift would be for something along the lines of public safety, criminal justice. Our budget is so big, that's not gonna make a difference where that goes, but if that's what we get it for, to make sure we maintain those, that'll easily eat up that money. So it's not a stretch of any kind.
Well, I think what I included in here, retaining public safety, criminal justice, and other essential services. That basically covers 90% of everything.
I agree, but peanut butter sandwich or peanut butter flavored bread, simple, succinct, right to the point. This way we can make sure we keep our deputies and keep our courts and the infrastructure. That's where that money's gonna go in the first place anyway.
So what's your specific request for revision?
Again, I like the idea of it's closer to the levy lid lift number one, just the simplicity of it, as long as it goes back right up to where we need to be.
So it's a single lid lift, single year lid lift, as opposed to a multi-year, which is the same $2,700,000, but eliminates the CPI increases.
And phase it over
for
time.
5 years.
Just because I think, once you put that out there, have people, a large percentage won't even understand that, and automatically put in distrust, keeping somebody gets the same amount, just with a lot less of the work. Also, I'd like
No,
to,
you don't get to the same amount, because what those additional increases would mean, potentially, I mean, we may end up bumping up against the $1.80, but it potentially can mean additional couple of $100,000 of revenue annually.
but if we structure it to where it does get to the $1.80, then we're already there.
Well, no, because if the assessed values increase,
That downward pressure.
yeah, you have a downward pressure to reduce that $1.80. So as we go out in years where the assessed value is increasing, the tendency is for the rate to go down,
Okay.
which gives us the capacity to do those incremental CPI increases.
Now, have you done the research to see if those pass? Because part of the stuff that we're reading,
That
shows that.
That's some do and some
Yeah,
don't.
that the single flavor, as they call it, and the thing is what goes through, especially when it's given a purpose. But I also want to throw out the idea of the levy shift as well. We haven't been talking about because we've reached that cap at the city level where they already have those issues. But if we move forward with this, they lose whatever percentage is that's going to be eaten out of their budget anyway.
They're gonna have the Metropolitan Park District probably prorated.
That's right. So they actually do have something to lose. So if they have something to lose, we might be able to keep our tax rate basically the same. I don't know how much we could each, we haven't done the number yet, by doing the shift between the road department and our general fund. And they would be more likely to go for it because at least they'll get something, better something out than nothing.
And this is both city and county voters on the multi-year.
Correct. Now, the levy shift is a one-year shift. It goes back to the old levy rate. So it doesn't increase the highest lawful levy. The lid lift increases the amount and leaves it there. It changes the highest lawful levy, so that every year successive to
And
that,
you're saying there is no levy shift that does that?
no, you would have to do a levy shift every year to accomplish the same thing. So a levy shift, just like it did when it was done in 2016. Yes, in 2016. We increased our revenues by
Yeah, we use
$1,824,000.
a different.
And then that disappeared in
I'm talking about the
2017.
one though that takes the vote of the people to shift those numbers.
That's a lid lift. That's a single flavor.
But
Basic
but
lid
moving it from the road fund to the general fund, not the,
We reduce theirs in others, is that what you're talking
we
about?
reduce the road fund and
That can be done councilmatically by setting their budget. You cannot change their levy rate downward.
you can switch it over with the vote of the people. Okay, we'll look at this after, you can,
I don't see any lid lift
that's what.
that says
That's
take
what most
the road
counties-
fund.
That's what most counties have done. Is they shifted from their road fund. That's why their general fund is so much higher. But we'll look at that afterwards.
Okay, there's, as far as,
I think that might be a function that bullet about reducing the road expenses. And
Right.
reducing the levy.
correct.
I don't think
There's no way to reduce the levy. Correct me if I'm wrong, Amber, is there any way to reduce a levy rate? The highest lawful levy?
Not, I mean, you wouldn't reduce your highest lawful levy because that's just built
Highest,
every
yeah.
year, but you can reduce your rate voluntarily, like that's what the
Correct.
city did when
But
they,
you can't
for the
reduce your
shift.
highest lawful levy.
No,
So the highest lawful levy for the road fund would stay the highest lawful levy. It would be councilmatically,
But you could
reduced.
transfer it,
yeah,
yeah, you could.
But that doesn't take a vote of the people.
I mean, a shift, a levy shift is essentially what you're talking
Yes.
about, and that doesn't go to a vote of the
there,
people.
there is the one though that allows you to take the capacity from one and move it over to the other, and that takes a vote of the people in order to go through. But even still, before you can go there, you have to make sure that it doesn't affect any capacity in any of the junior districts. But if there's buy down, then it doesn't affect the capacity.
I'm not aware of one where they vote to do that, so.
I mean, we'll have to circle
We'll
back.
go over
I'm not
that.
aware of anything either that would allow to do that. Just take capacity out of roads and move it over into current expense unless you councilmatically affect the impact of budget of roads, which reduces their budget, reduces their levy, and then ultimately reduces their levy rate.
You and I will go over the book later. For now, we'll stick with this one, but
Okay.
just saying that's, we had conversations about that before. But we'll go over it.
Yeah. Any others?
So, we just kind of go back here a minute. So are we in agreement to strike the conversion and purchase of the vehicle?
Yeah, I don't think it's needed.
I'm also in favor of, well, okay, so,
And then the reduction of the road fund expenses, do we want to leave that in for this, or do we feel that that's a separate?
I think it would be a commitment we would be making to people as we put the ballot on the measure on the ballot. And we haven't even had the discussion of how much we could reduce the expenses. So I'm not ready for that, but if we could have that discussion sometime between now and hearing, it would be a floater, so to speak. And I don't know.
Between now and the hearing on the 1st of August?
Right, because to me, if it's in here, and we made that commitment, and I don't even know what a budget reduction looks like.
Correct.
What projects go away, what
Right.
staffing goes away, I don't know those things.
Okay, so we can get some follow-up on that. Okay, and then I think the other one that was kind of a discussion point maybe was the adoptive park
Correct.
commitment in here.
And I haven't even brought that,
Right.
as a function of the Parks Department, that opportunity and that, but that has been brought forward a number of times by the Parks Advisory Board to help Mason County's parks and manage its parks. So I would pursue that with the advisory board and come back to the commission with creating some sort of a program to do that.
To leave it in?
The commissioners will pursue a volunteer adoptive park program.
Okay.
Change the language, to just, because we may find an implementation. Commissioner Nevlin, I appreciate what you're saying about, simpler, might be what it would take to get it passed, but I'm looking at this from a function of what policy-wise I would want to put forward, and not what would get passed. So that's why I think the policy, on the policy level, for the county, the best option is multi-year.
I'll just remind you though, although I don't disagree with you, that is what's best. If it doesn't pass, it doesn't matter how good it is.
But it's for the voters to decide whether or not it'll pass.
Okay, so, hearing that, Frank, then what are the next steps?
So, hearing that, I'll make modifications to this draft, send it off to Mike, to prosecutor and deputy prosecutor, have them review it. Next Monday, we'll come back with a revision to the draft for review and approval on August 1st. Commission.
And then, one other request I think I would have is, just for everybody's own edification, if we could bring forward the guidelines for use of county resources on a proposition like this. I think we're allowed one informational piece or something along those lines. And then if we could also have a discussion about how we'd like to approach beyond August 1st hearing, how we would like to engage the public to provide input.
Do you want to hear something next Tuesday?
Right.
So I'll make tomorrow's agenda.
Anything further?
Any questions?